Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to the face and the card making space and a couple of Halloween cards. We're going to build a spooky scene using one stencil set. I've got this Picket Fence Studios A Message in the Night stencil, and it comes with the masks, which one of them I'm going to use. And yeah, super simple, technically one layer in a sense, and very minimal embellishments, but a lot of splatter. So, as always, everything I used is listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. It's what helps pay the bills, keeps the channel going. At the end of the video, this way, in the end screen, I'll link to my 2024 Halloween playlist where I've got I think we're getting close to a dozen videos so far, and I'll keep adding to it as I get them posted, so you can check those out. And yeah, let's get into making these cards. So I started off with some smooth white cardstock, and I'd already trimmed it down to 4 inches by 5 1/4, just slightly smaller than an A2 card front. And I'm using the Message in the Night stencil. And I'm starting with the moon in the corner of the stencil, putting it in the corner of the cardstock, and using some gray inks. I'm using Altenew fresh dye inks. And I'm kind of mixing two gray shades, limestone and silverstone. And I'm using my little pint-sized paper pouncers. And I would apply the ink, like the lighter shade of ink with the pouncer, and then add a little bit of the darker ink. And then after I would remove the stencil, I would pounce over the like open areas there of the moon just to add a bit of that gray ink there as well. So it wasn't like strict, like harsh white. And then I needed to create a mask because the moon shape isn't really a perfect circle. And this is just easy. So I just took a piece of masking paper and just trace the edge of that little moon, just line it up right with the corner, because again, this was the easiest way to do it, and then trim this out. And masking paper it's sticky on one side, kind of like Post-it tape, so you could probably use that as well, or even copy paper technically, but the bonus of masking paper is it's got the little bit of sticky on it, so it stays in place, and you can technically reuse your mask like over and over again until just depending on what you're doing, like they'll work for multiple uses until they become so saturated that they no longer mask. So yeah, trimmed it out with scissors and then peel off the backing, stick it into place. And now my little moon is masked off, so I don't get any ink over the moon area. So once I've done that, I'm going to start adding all my colors for my background, and I'm going to use more Altenew fresh dye inks, using my little paper pouncers, and just slap it on this color. You can technically achieve a pretty decent blend with little paper pouncers if you're going for like you want like a perfect, and I'm using like air quotes because again, perfection's overrated, but if you want like a really smooth blend, I highly recommend like blending brushes. You can achieve it with pouncers, and I have done it. It takes a bit more work, but the thing I kind of love with the pouncers, especially backgrounds like this, is I kind of love them not being perfect, and you get a bit more like sort of texture, and it kind of makes me think more, sort of cloudy galaxy themed backgrounds, if that makes sense. Plus, this is just not less work, but easier on the hands and arms. Sometimes blending, depending on what I'm doing, your arm gets a workout. And I'm okay with that, but sometimes not so much. And the other thing, of course, too, that was why Picket Fence did the pouncers and then the pint-sized pouncers, is those with mobility issues, because sometimes holding and using a blending brush it just doesn't work, it's hard for some to do that, and the pouncers make it a lot easier. So this is going to look like a hot mess. I'm fine with it. Once all the things get added, it ain't so bad. And like I had said, I wasn't aiming for like a perfect blend. I was kind of mucking around at this point because I was like, let's just see what happens. Also, I'm adding greens, and green and purple do make mud. Again, I am more than okay with that. This is the fun too for me when it comes to like Halloween and spooky and everything. Mud's okay. You know, imperfect blends, a-okay. A little bit of messiness, also okay, you know, because it's Halloween. We're going to work with it. So I just kind of kept working through, going and adding, you know, burnt greens and purples and all the things. And it will all come together. It will. So once I was, you know, happy with the mess I had going on, because it's just messy, but, you know, just work with me. I'm going to, this part was a test because I wasn't sure. This is what I talk about when, you know, when you're adding colors or you're layering colors, things like that, to let things dry. Because I went with the tree portion of this stencil, and I'm adding a really dark gray. This industrial diamond is a very, very dark gray. But I wasn't sure because I was like, when it's wet, it looks great. You know, that's kind of the look I was going for. But I was like, is it going to stay this way? Because these inks dry back and soften. So what it looks like now, and then what it looks like when it's actually dry, as you could see, completely different. And I'm glad I let it dry because I was like, you know, like as it looked as it was wet, it was fine. But once it dried, you could barely see it, and that's not what I wanted. So I just lined the stencil back up over it and used black ink this time. This will still soften as well. It won't be quite as you know, dark as it is when I first added it, but much better than that gray ink, because the gray did just like soften into all those other colors and wasn't what I wanted, you know, because I wanted this spooky tree to actually show up on my background. So black ink for the win. And I also added it along the edge because you got to love a good like spooky, craggy sort of tree image, and added all of that. And then before I go on to anything else, I want to add my splatter. So this is where I use the mask portion of this stencil. I put the panel into my splat box, masked off the main tree. The other side of it there where it's just the branches, I just left that because you only get the one mask in the set, and I'm fine with that. So I just wanted mostly the tree to be masked off and not covered by the splatter. And I'm using, of course, my picket fence paper splatter liquid watercolor. Paper splatter watercolor liquid white Snowflake. My go-to to add the shimmer. And my fan brush, and I'd put that on my little palette and then heavily splatter this all over the background. That moon mask is still in place as well. So that way I'm only getting splatter on the background, not the tree and not the moon. So I started with that liquid white snowflakes. So that adds like shimmery splatter. Used it all up, had to add a bit more so I can get both of these backgrounds. And then I'll add some white splatter, which with that I'm using the Spellbinders Splatter White Opaque Watercolor. Love this stuff. Fabulous. So got that out of the jar, added that to my palette after I wiped off my palette, cleaned off my brush. Added the Splatter White to my palette. Same thing, added a bit of water to this to thin it out. And thin it out a little bit extra. If you want it to be more white, don't add as much water. You kind of got to play with it. But I wanted it to not be like stark white. So added a bit more water and did the same thing. I masked off the tree. The moon mask is still in place for now. And then heavily splattered this all over the background. And then repeated it on the second card front here. So now I've got just shimmery splatter and a bit of the white splatter. And it's just fun. Just fun. So after adding all of that, I want to use the stencil and add the witch, who's the main focus. The main focus of my scene. So removed my mask and then peeled off the moon mask. You could still leave it in place, but I wanted to remove it because it just, the minute you remove it, everything starts coming together, you know? So remove that, and then I'm going to stick these to my paper inking palette just to hold these in place. And I'm just going to stick these side by side so that I can add the stenciling with the witch. This time I'm going to use Blackboard, Picket Fence, Paper Glaze Velvet in Blackboard, which I've used in previous videos. And I keep my paste sealed with press and seal, as always. This just helps, you know, extend the life of them. But like I always say, use your paste. Don't let them sit. They will dry out. You don't want that. The press and seal definitely helps. And like I said, extend the life, but do not hoard your paste. Don't collect them, use them because they'll dry out eventually. So I applied the paste with a palette knife. I was careful. I kind of applied from the bottom of like the witch upwards because there's that one area along the right between her arm and her dress that I didn't want that to wiggle and move. If you're, more concerned about it, or, you weren't sure, a little bit of pixie spray would take care of that. But I was just like, no, I'll just place the stencil in place and then, carefully apply the paste like kind of right over that sort of, I don't know how it's called, like loose piece is kind of what it is of the stencil. And then it was fine. Everything's kind of anchored in place just with the paste. And then once I was done applying it, seal up the jar, stuck my stencil in a container of water, cleaned it off really, really well. And technically, I actually did this portion first, the inside of the card, but just with editing, it makes more sense to insert it now. But this is actually what I did first, because then I didn't have to clean this. I didn't have to clean the stencil off. I could let it soak, and I dealt with it when I was done everything. So on the inside of the card, I used the stencil with the gray inks. So I did the Silverstone ink for the tree and just pounce that onto the inside of my card base, which is a top folding A2 white note card. And then for the witch, I used the darkest gray, which was the pure graphite. Yes, I used pure graphite. I don't know why I didn't use that for the tree. That might have also been why. The industrial diamond isn't the darkest shade of gray. I'm just noticing this now as I'm doing the voiceover. Pure graphite might have worked on the card front. It might have given me luck, but I'm still happy with it. The black, dried back to the right thing. So I learned that during the editing and the voiceover. Yay me. Still. Explain the whole thought process is what it is. So anywho, once the paste was dry on the card fronts, I am going to stamp a sentiment, and the sentiment is from this May Your Night Be Creepy set. It's got this cute little garland of pumpkins that I kind of really love. I almost stamped that on the background, but I was like, I don't know, that might have been too much. So I didn't. I just used the sentiment, but it was another option. Anyway, I just stamped the sentiment directly onto the card fronts with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And then on the insides of the cards, I stamped another sentiment from the same set onto the insides with that Nocturne ink. So lined it up, inked it up, stamped it, repeated the process a second time. And then I pulled out this cute little Nibbles. Picket Fences released several different sets. There's some Halloween ones, a couple fall ones. They're super cute. And then they've released some Christmas sets, and they're called Nibbles, and they're just cute. So I used the Candy Ghost because there's little bats in that set. So I just ran them through using my little scout machine, my little die cut machine, and some Tonic Black Sapphire glitter cardstock. So I've got these cute little glittery bats, and I'm going to adhere these into place with just little dabs of Craft Tacky glue. As always, I only add the glue to like the center, like where the body is, so the wings can be popped up a bit. Just again, creates a little bit of dimension without any bulk. So I just picked them up with my tweezers, put the adhesive right on the center, pressed it down. Technically could be done here, but I decided I also wanted to rough up the edges. And like I said in the intro, these technically can be one layer cards, but this is why I do things like this. You can kind of see the backs of these cardstock pieces. I've got ink smears, all the things. This is why I don't often do like directly to the card front on the card base, because of stuff like that. I still even managed to get ink smears like on the back of one of the card bases, like right on the back of the card, but I'm fine with that. That is what it is. But this is usually why I work on separate pieces, so that one, I make a mess, and two, it lets me do things like this, because I use my little paper distressor and roughed up the edges of the cardstock just to create that extra bit of texture. And then to emphasize it, I took the black ink and my little paper pouncer and just pounced that black ink right onto those edges, so that all that roughed up cardstock just picks up that black ink, and it just gives it that little extra something. And depending on how hard I pressed the pouncer onto those edges, it also like added like almost like little smears of black ink around the perimeter of the card or the card front as well. And I was okay with that. You know, because again, Halloween cards, we can be a little messy, have a little fun with it. Why not? So I went around, added that off camera. I didn't even realize, again, I ended up like smearing a little bit of black ink over the moon, which I was able to remove with an eraser without like wrecking anything. Because, you know, like I said, you guys, I am a hot mess, literally, like in so many ways, not just when I'm making, but also when I'm editing and doing voiceovers and figuring out like, oh, I did something completely backwards or whatever it is, you know? So got it all roughed up, added the ink, and then I'm going to adhere this to the card base with craft tacky glue. Once that is adhered, the cards are complete. So we've got shimmer, sparkly little bats, the texture of the witch, and the tree is still, you know, in the background technically and not, you know, super harsh, so that I didn't want the tree to overshadow the witch. That was my whole process of why, you know, I was doing gray inks, etc. Even on the inside of the card, you know, because she is the queen of the card. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said in the intro, I'll have links to all of the things in the description box below, so you can check that out below if you are interested, and link to my socials, my blog post, etc. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in supporting me over on Patreon, the link to that is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!